One of the most important things to consider in the requirements definition and design phase of a given mission is what your baseline ops concept will be. For the International Space Station, it was a well-known requirement that we needed to provide command and control capability to the vehicle. And in addition to the onboard computers, there was a requirement to have a laptop control so that the crew had an interface into those computers. The U.S. requirement was fulfilled with a portable computer system, or PCS, which allowed for 1553 communications between the laptop and the onboard command and control computers. The Russian requirement to fulfill that was fulfilled with a different laptop, different design, that was also 1553 interface, but also had a different backbone connection that would allow it to command via an alternate path as well. In addition to the U.S. laptop and the Russian laptop, in order to satisfy the requirements for the Japanese and European space agencies, they too had their own individual laptops. Where this left us with was 4 different laptops with 4 different graphical interfaces, with 4 different teams on the ground responsible for training and maintaining those laptops, and the crew members on board that were faced with having to learn all these different systems across one integrated International Space Station. So this seemingly common requirement eventually turned into a very complex operational problem that resulted in significant training hours poured into these systems. Some contributing factors to this problem, for Space Station in particular, is we had different countries that were interpreting these requirements and did not have specific direction or guidelines for their operations team to consider in how they carried out those requirements. So we've taken these lessons that we experienced in the portable computer system and tried to apply them to other areas of ISS. For example, our current galley system, and by galley I mean the means by which the crew rehydrates their food and gets their drinking water, is fairly distributed across the station. And this was because we had a requirement for a food warmer come in at one time and a requirement for a portable water system come in at a different time. So now we are working with the engineers in the design of a dedicated galley rack. The crew office is heavily involved in this, along with mission operations, to try to ensure that the requirements that are going into this rack fully take into account the true expected operations of this system. For the designers and engineers associated with exploration, my advice to you would be to seek out the experience of flown crew members or experienced mission operations personnel to give inputs to the design of your piece of hardware, realizing that you have budget restrictions to adhere to and may not be able to implement or take into consideration all of the inputs, but it does provide you the full package from which you can make the appropriate trades to get the best designed hardware.
You know, another aspect of the PCS story is that after we went through all the effort to put in place this laptop that was the crew's interface to command the vehicle, as it turns out, the crew commands the vehicle very rarely. In fact, there have been cases where the crew had told me that they had never actually issued a command from that laptop, and the primary use of that laptop is actually they keep one display up that tells them whether the radio link to the ground is on or off. It's just the way things evolve that the ground does most of that systems management, and of course it wouldn't be a very good use of the crew's time to do commanding that we could just take care of from the ground. So, you know, with all that effort, as it turns out, that's a relatively rarely used system. One key takeaway when you're putting together an interface like that is that you need to think about you actually have a human using it, and you need to make sure that you have some commonality and everything sort of makes sense. When you sit down and use Microsoft Word or a device from Apple, it's not really an accident that you can sit down and sort of figure it out without a whole lot of training. There's some thought that went in before that. And I think a lot of times our systems, when we develop them, we don't put that level of thought into what we're doing, or we don't have that emphasis in the requirements. And so you shift from a development load to do that to an operations load where you've got to train someone to figure out how to do a relatively simple task.